心中种一颗泰山顶的松，生长成5000年骄傲的种，敞开胸襟，迎8面来风，自信的笑容，幸福的憧憬。
I'm here with Dylan Walker, and Dylan Walker has quite an interesting life. He's spent a lot of time in China. He's appeared on Chinese television. Dylan, why don't you tell us about yourself and how you got involved in all of this, how you ended up in China, etc.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Dylan Walker, and I am currently studying my master's degree in international politics at Beijing Language and Culture University. And this pretty much all started from a young age here in Western Mass studying Chinese from my best friend's mom. Taught me a little bit at their house, and then an interest came, and I went to a local Chinese school on the weekends at about 5 or 6 years old. And then from then, just a lot of self-studying Chinese, going to the school, and then eventually doing my undergrad at the same university I'm at now in Chinese language, and visiting China throughout high school a couple times, teaching English and so on, and have been there ever since, and then coming back every now and then on the vacations back to Massachusetts here.
Great. Now, is your family Chinese?
No, none of them are.
Okay. Now, in addition to studying Chinese, you're also a member of the Communist Party. Can you tell us how you came to join the Communist Party?
Sure. Yes, I'm a member of the CPUSA, Communist Party USA, and I joined when I was 18 years old. And I came to know about the CPUSA actually through studying Chinese Revolutionary and Party history. And that was since I had at a young age was interested in history, world history, and slowly moved to really learning a lot about China from when I started learning Chinese. And it was through studying the works of Chairman Mao and Chinese modern history and revolutionary history that I found out we had the CPUSA, we had our own party here. And that was around 15 or 16 years old, and I wanted to join right then and there, but the age limit, I had to wait. So I did a lot more studying of not only our party, but of course what was going on in China, modern times, and during their revolutionary period, and just learning as much as I could, and really grew to support this, our ideology and this belief that we have as communists in fighting for this world workers' internationalist movement.
Now, you also have a pretty good singing voice. So how is it that you came to appear on that television program in China?
It was before that. I had taken part in another type of program that a teacher at my university had recommended me to take part, which was a poetry, Chinese poetry contest. And they had wanted to have some foreigners to show their face on the show. And because I was interested in Chairman Mao and he was a very famous poet, I had recited one of his poems on the show. And then after that, slowly, every now and then I kind of got picked up by some of the media in China, very few times. And then I think it was either someone from that show or someone I met from that show, a student, another foreigner, gave my contact info to someone working for that show. And the singing program was for China's National Day to celebrate the founding of New China. So they wanted to have a show where foreigners from all over the world, different countries, backgrounds, ages, and professions in China would sing a song for China's birthday for this kind of a celebration.
And tell me, what was the reaction of the Chinese public to your dynamic television appearance?
After the video was posted online, like on the Weibo, the Chinese type Twitter website, after being posted on there, it was kind of shocking because back when I was first interviewed by some of the newspapers for being on the poetry show, it wasn't such a big, kind of appearance, and many people didn't see it so much. But I think it was after this being, a special time in China for the holiday and such a big show that they were quite surprised. And then through that, they were very, in mainland China, of course, they were happy to see they have a foreigner, an American especially, who, from his heart, bottom of his heart, is singing and wishing for China to become a more stronger, powerful country and for the people to have a better life there. And generally, the output was it was positive. But outside of China, you have this pro-Hong Kong independence people, pro-Taiwan independence. They, of course, made some nasty comments on Twitter, and even a Hong Kong independence news website, they had taken the video and the article from mainland China without my permission, wrote an article in English, posted on their website, and then that was picked up by CNN. I was mentioned in an article on CNN without any, approval or asking, can I mention my name or my school, and nothing. And they just put it on there. So
What did CNN say about you?
they had put on their specifically they were saying, I was singing on the show, singing praise songs for the president of China, for what they have now is called the Chinese Dream, has been going on, taken up by President Xi Jinping, and that's what the song is about, called the Chinese Dream, my dream, which is a dream for the country to be powerful, the people to be happy. And they were saying, oh, he's just doing this and for their propaganda, and then people's comments saying, he has everything paid for him by the government, he has all this money, he everything this and that. And of course they don't know at all what the story is, because you have this one pro Hong Kong independence source not even asking me, interviewing me, and just making it up, and the people going whatever they want on Twitter and whatnot.
It sounds like you made quite a splash to get that kind of reaction with your singing.
Yeah, I was quite surprised that it was picked up by CNN especially. It's kind of expected maybe a Hong Kong independence or Hong Kong or Taiwan independence would say something, but not for it to make it to CNN. It was a small piece in the article, but I was I was angry, to be honest, and quite frustrated that was without my permission, putting my name, that I'm a Communist Party member, and my university's name, and not based off the fact.
Doxing you, in effect, right?
Yeah.
And it led to a lot of harassment, you're telling me.
Yeah, I didn't have anything because I don't have a Twitter myself. So whatever I saw was in the pro Hong Kong independence website. In their article, they showed some of the comments on there. Some were positive and some were negative, but the majority was negative. But they didn't put the username's name on there, so you couldn't tell who wrote it. But a lot of it, they had the English and Chinese translation of it. So you could say, saying some pretty nasty things, personal things, attacking me, family, and then also the, political side.
Okay, well, tell me, why is it that you are so supportive of the Chinese Communist Party? I mean, we're being told here in the United States constantly that they're our enemy, that they caused us all to get coronavirus, that China is taking away all our jobs. You've heard it all. What is it that you say that that makes you not go along with this? What alternative information do you have?
I think a big part is when I first started learning about this is I think it's with anything. Of course, you cannot just learn about something from your own nation, your own party's side. To really understand for example, what the Chinese Communist Party thinks or how it is in China, regardless if you agree or not, you have to read their side. You have to look at their material to understand. And it helps, especially if you know the language. That gives you, normally you're stuck on the surface. If you can understand the language, that helps you understand the history and society. You can go even deeper than maybe most people can, or those who don't pay much attention. And it was through that, a lot of my own research. And because, of course, on YouTube, we can see anything. Anything can put anything on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. And it was seeing that, plus myself going there. And, like I always say now with people in regard to the coronavirus outbreak is when they make these statements about China or what's going on inside China, I will tell them, well, you may say that what the Chinese media or government is telling us about the virus on the TV or news is just what they want us to tell us. But I say that may be so, but the difference is what they're telling us is true, because all we have to do is just go outside and step outside and we see what's happening. If there's, our temperature is being taken and down to the lowest city. I was during the outbreak in China, I was there at my girlfriend's house for Chinese New Year in their small city, and we could see the swift response within days of what happened and the measures, and we were the whole country was locked in, and just the crazy things that were being said out there just lead you to believe that they're saying this, of course, with a political motive into wanting to mislead, I would think, the American people and the public, because the majority of Americans don't know a lot or anything about China, and what they get is just from, regardless if it's a left media, right media, independent media in the US, or conspiracy theorists, whatever, they don't take the time to do their own research or to even ask Chinese who live there. Yeah.
There's a lot of young people in the United States getting interested in socialism and communism now.
Yeah.
But it seems like almost universally among them, there's this belief that China is not really socialist, right? That it's they have a market sector, there's billionaires there, therefore it's not a socialist country. Can you explain why China is actually a socialist country and why you, as a strong supporter of Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought, would support the current Chinese government?
I would say a big part of that, of course, is you have the different sides here and also in China who look at what happened before the opening up in reform and what happened after. And what also President Xi Jinping has said multiple times on open occasion is that you cannot negate the previous 30 years before the opening up, but you cannot negate also what happened after the opening up in reform, the current 30 years, because both what they say for like Chinese kind of way of thinking is you have to look at this through a lens of like a historical type of lens. You cannot just only focus on what's happening now in China. Or they have some market influences, some market mechanism inside the economy, or you look back before and it's just all planned economy because they're all interconnected. And as we know with socialism, and to realize communism, you have to have the modes of production have to be modernized, have to be totally modernized to be able to realize that kind of a communist society, and the state disappears. China, as we know, is in the beginning stages of development of socialism, which they will be in for quite some time. It doesn't happen overnight. And during the time period between the founding of New China until the start of the opening up in reform, they had just emerged out of being a half feudalist, half colonial state, between the nationalist party and then the foreign countries invading over past 100 years at that time. And they were left with nothing after the country was founded, and they had to rebuild everything. And of course, we know mistakes, were made, and they're openly admitted. But it's that realization that in order to realize the lofty goal of communism is that we have to, like I said, modernize the modes of production. So that being said, they have to do what they can to, of course, raise the people's standard of living, to make the country more powerful, to develop the military, develop the economy. And like we've had teachers in my high school in the past and in my school life here say it's not socialism with Chinese characteristics, it's capitalism with Chinese characteristics, which just shows you, they don't know, the reasons why these opening up in reform was made. They don't know why some things are the way they are and what's going on today and back then. So it's not easy to do, but it's very important, like I said, to understand what happened before and after to connect the two.
One thing that shocks me is that, there's a lot of love for Mao Zedong in China. Sure, there's a lot of love for Marx and Lenin, but there's absolutely no love for the Gang of Four. I mean, the Gang of Four are considered like some of the most hated people. But yet, when I meet American communists, a lot of them that would consider themselves to be Maoists or whatever, they have this belief that somehow the Gang of Four were good. Can you talk about the Gang of Four and how they're viewed in China?
I myself, after learning about this history after the end of the Cultural Revolution, of course we learned about it here in the U.S. in school, in a high school history class and whatnot about the Gang of Four, but of course it wasn't a deep, in-depth look considering it's from the American perspective, not from a Chinese perspective. But inside China, and my perspective is that the Gang of Four, I think that they were also after in the later years of Chairman Mao that with his age, mistakes were made during that time, and that we do believe that the Gang of Four did try to, kind of take advantage of this and take power, of Chairman Mao's wife, his last wife at that time, and they put them on trial afterwards, and they're generally viewed inside mainland China. The majority of people, I think, generally view them as, of course, they were not a good group of people, these four, and they did what they did it created a lot of trouble in those later years of Chairman Mao's life.
The Cultural Revolution is not remembered as a good time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and it was a lot of bad things definitely happened there. And as I remember a few years ago when I was studying in my undergrad, the People's Daily, they had put a piece out. I think it was on the anniversary and the end of the Cultural Revolution, saying that this thing will never happen again in China. So it shows you that it's not like what they say in the West, how they don't admit, the Chinese party and government does not admit to their mistakes. They try to hide everything. It's all open. They openly admit it, and they assure that this kind of thing will never happen again. And that, because there was a lot of, things that happened during that time, a lot of bad things, pain and suffering, but there, as we see that, if you would relate that to some of the problems we see inside China today, of course, it's some of the societal issues that are in China, of course, are an extension of things that have happened. And, as we know, New China is just 70 years old. So it's a very, very new country compared to the United States, almost 300 years old. In China, U.S. is kind of like the mature older grandfather, and China is just like a little kid, a young child, very young. So with all these special periods, and they're all historical products of what happened during those time periods. Of course, there's some spillover in society and maybe the people's mindset and thinking, but over time, that is changing. That they don't want to have something like that. But my personal opinion is to say that, of course, not everything is black and white, and maybe the political aspect or the societal aspect, there were a lot of bad did happen, but of course, it's not able to negate the good things that did happen with the economy or with science and technology. They're putting yesterday was the anniversary of their satellite that they launched into space, just yesterday, I think, and how their atomic bomb in the testing this, it was during these 1960s, 70s periods. So people don't know a lot about that. They just kind of remember this one thing. So it's not to negate everything that happened. Of course, there's good and bad in both.
Now, one thing I'm curious about is, I mean, as an American living in China, as someone who doesn't look Chinese, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do people treat you? I mean, are you treated well? I mean, do they treat you like you're the enemy, or do they treat you friendly? Like when you walk down the street, do people look at you? Like, what's life like for you in China?
For me, it's generally, being in the capital, being in Beijing, it's a very good life. Never feel anything against my life or any danger, sense of non-safety. But of course, you have some people in China where they're not like come out at you and say some nasty things or because of the way you look. And of course, you'll get stares when you're walking down the street, not because of the way you dress, just because of your skin color. Because maybe, of course, you have people inside China who have never seen a foreigner or have never been this close, and if they're a young kid or older generation. But generally, I've never had these kind of problems. They're very friendly, and it especially helps when you can speak the language. I feel it brings you a lot closer. As a quote from Nelson Mandela, he once said, I think it goes, saying hello to someone, having a conversation can make you become, you can acquaint with them, but talking to them in their own language goes to the person's heart. So being able to communicate with them in their own native language in their country will make them want to be more friendly. And I've had, because of my language, my Chinese level, I've had people when I'm speaking either on the phone or outside, and they look at the way I look, they think I'm from the Xinjiang region of China, the Uyghur ethnic group, because of the skin color and then the language. They don't even think I'm a foreigner. Or they ask, are you from Xinjiang or are you Russian? And I say, no. They say, oh, what are you? So I'm from the US. Oh, I never thought that. So, I kind of, and then with the political view, once they get to know you, because it's sensitive to talk about politics and or religion or whatnot, but once you get to know people closely, then they kind of put aside, like I tell them to my close friends in my university, don't think of me as a foreigner. Just treat me and talk to me as if you were a local Chinese. I don't want any kind of a treatment or anything. Just, otherwise you have this kind of a force in between you that keeps you apart. Just treat me as you would a local.
Yeah, well, talking also about your experience in China, I read President Xi's writings, and he emphasizes Mao Zedong thought and socialism, but he also emphasizes Confucius.
Yeah.
And is China culturally conservative in some ways compared to the United States? Is there much more traditional family structure and such?
Yes, I think so. For example, you can see during the Chinese New Year, especially, for a lot of people, working people in China, some people, the only holiday they get is during the Chinese New Year vacation. And as we know, it's the biggest migration of people on the planet. And, they'll find whatever way they can, no matter how far away they are from their home, or no matter how far their job is from their home or whatever, people will always find a way to go home, whether it's by plane, train, bus, spending 30 hours on a hard-to-seat train, or standing ticket, standing on the train. They always find a way because they know it's this sense of family and this unit of the family that's rooted inside ancient Chinese culture. Even during the New China, founding of New China in the early years, that's still always there, which I think, that aspect of Confucianism and this traditional culture does help keep the country together now, as we've seen the tremendous work done with everybody in the country to help fight against the virus with the epidemic prevention work. But conservative aspects in the older generation, more people are a bit conservative, I think, and younger people in the bigger cities like Beijing, Shanghai, these big cities, even though they come from different cities and come to Beijing, but after being there for some time, they're more open to some new things. But in smaller cities or in a village, of course, even some young people in those areas are maybe in their thinking or their, with certain maybe things considered taboo, they're a bit more conservative. But it's opening up, I think, slowly with the mingling in of other foreigners coming and a lot of Chinese going abroad. It's slowly changing, but still, I think it's a kind of a conservative society in some aspects.
Well, also now the education system in China is very effective. I mean, China is churning out engineers and scientists. They're leading in like math and science. We in the United States are not doing so well in those fields.
Right.
But you actually have gone to school in the United States, and now you're going to school in China. How is education in China different?
I think, as we know, in the United States, for example, we have with the public education system here, because I've finished from elementary school, kindergarten until high school, and here, they say we encourage more kind of free thinking and, discussion and this kind of thing. But then we have this kind of notion that in China, they don't have that. That it's just, rote memorization. The teacher tells you what to do. That is to a degree there. And that, I think, is a big part of it. But that has its strengths as well as weaknesses. As, how we talked about just now, the U.S. not doing so well in like math and sciences. Like, I have some of my classmates where we would talk about this, even my own girlfriend. Some of the stuff we learned in high school, maybe they already learned in elementary school in math or in science.
Wow.
And even though it's rote memorization, they still can excel faster in these things. So that has its strengths. But then they say, with maybe there's a lack of discussion in the classroom. But, based off my grad school, my major of international politics, that can be kind of a touchy subject depending on who's in the class or what country the foreigners are from in our class. But we do a lot of classroom discussions, and especially because we have, like my class this year, there's 14 of us, so 7 Chinese, 7 foreigners. And because the 7 of us foreigners are from different countries around the world, our teachers especially will want to ask our opinion about like a specific topic, or what's going on in your country with this. And of course, Donald Trump in the US comes up a lot, no matter what class we are for our majors. So they always ask my opinion, what is it like, or to ask the other foreigners, what's your opinion on Donald Trump or this one thing he said. So there's actually a lot of encouragement with this kind of small group discussion, open, big class discussion. It actually happens more than maybe some people would think.
Now, you've studied in China. You're a member of the Communist Party, but you're not anti-American. You're a patriotic person, right? I mean, tell me about that. Some people think that China is our enemy. Some people think that communism is un-American, but that's not the idea that I hear from you. Can you talk about your identity as an American communist who studies in China?
Yeah, sure. I'm not anti-America. I always say how it's like because the culture here politically and historically is much different than you can say China or the DPRK, these type of countries where patriotism is linked to loving the country as well as loving the party. Whereas here, it's a way different political culture where you love the country, but we don't have this connection to this political party. And for me, some of my Chinese friends would say, "Oh, why do you say these things about the U.S.? How come you're doing something?" And I would say, "Well, for me, there's a difference. I love my home, my hometown, my family's here, of course. But that does not mean that I love the system and the government, which I'm, of course, not supportive of. And I have to make that clear that, of course, I can say things openly about, the bad things that happen here, the defaults and the defects inside the U.S. system and the government. And pointing that out, I don't think is anti-American or bashing America, because on one hand, you cannot say, the U.S. government can point fingers at every other country in the world, make a human rights report, and say how every other country, and then ignore its own home problems at home, but then not allow any other country to do the same thing towards the U.S., then that's anti-American. So it's kind of ironic when people will say that to me, and I've had trouble with it here because people will say, communism is anti-American and you're a traitor or this kind of thing, or go back to China. If you complain so much here, then you just leave, don't stay here. And, it's that kind of a thinking that, well, our party has been here for over 100 years and we have been fighting alongside with the American workers ever since, very instrumental in many things, Social Security, unions, these things. Without our participation, who knows what could have happened? Of course, it's a big what if, but the fact is we were there advocating for this stuff and against the Jim Crow laws and racism. And with the way Americans are taught about this, ideas about communism and socialism, they're led to, have this kind of warped, twisted idea of it, and led to not believe what is the truth about it, and not given a full picture. So it's hard to sometimes explain to them. why we think the way we think. Because I say, China's my home. That's where I go to school. My girlfriend there. That's where my life is. But it's not going to change that my home here is in Western Massachusetts and I grew up here.
I always point out to people that Abraham Lincoln had a communist general in his army named August Willich, who led soldiers to battle. And that Roosevelt also, he met with communists at the White House. He even let Gilbert Green from the Young Communist League sleep over at the White House. And those are our two most loved presidents, Lincoln and Roosevelt, the two presidents who had the closest relationship with communists. And that, Roosevelt spoke very highly of Stalin and thought very highly of Stalin. And that Karl Marx wrote glowing articles for the New York Tribune newspaper praising Abraham Lincoln, and that Marxists were central in the fight against slavery in the United States. I feel like we are very much part of this country. They've tried to bury us and tried to hide us, but we're very much part of this. And I argue also that if the global capitalist system dismantled, and we could start trading with the world the way China trades with the world, on the basis of win-win cooperation, where countries get wealthier by trading with us and we get wealthier in the process, where it's no longer a zero-sum game in international relations, where we're helping countries get wealthier and raise themselves up out of poverty. I think that would result in a much more prosperous country here in the United States, and
of course,
a lot happier. So go on. Yes, say what you want to say.
Oh no, I definitely agree with that. As we've seen in the past years, President Xi Jinping has put out his idea and his plan for the shared common, what's it called? I forget how you say it in English. It's the shared community, for human, I forget the English translation, but it's this idea of in this plan, the Belt and Road Initiative, One Belt, One Road Initiative, to include every country in the planet. You even have, I think, Italy, this country, is involved inside this too, and they're a Western European, democracy and a very rich country, and they're taking part. And
I think it's the shared destiny of all mankind, right?
Yeah, shared destiny of all mankind.
Say it in Chinese.
It's the 世界命运共同体. This one, yeah.
Very
good.
It's
So it's this idea that it's not, you have to have just the U.S. as the center of everything, and you're either with it, and if you're not, then you're an enemy. If you side with China, then you're perceived as an enemy of the United States. That's like you said, it's a lose-lose. No one's going to win by that. And you see now, after the epidemic outbreak in China, with that as an example, you saw after, within 2 months, they had it under control and things are going back to normal. You have kids going back to school, going back to work now. The shopping malls are open, the restaurants are open, everything's, slowly, step by step reopening. And as soon as they were able to get themselves controlled with their situation, now you see how many medical teams they've sent all around the world to help, how many supplies they've sent to so many countries, even to the US. And you saw before Donald Trump was saying these nasty things about China, calling it the Chinese virus and saying all these things, and then all of a sudden one day he just stopped. And there was a Weibo on the Chinese Twitter when that article was out saying that he had said he's going to stop calling it the Chinese virus. The first comment on there was, uh-oh, he wants help. Uh-oh, now you want masks, because now he realizes, it's a funny kind of comment, but it's true. Now he stopped. He needs help from China. Because there's no way. We would discuss this in our classes, how no one country can do this by themselves. The whole world needs to work together with this, whether it's sending doctors, medical equipment, PPE and whatnot. It has to, this is the only way we're going to be able to, put this under control and to eventually defeat this virus in the future. But it's it can be quite in the future, I believe that's what it's going to be like on the way up, and more countries are going to see, in times of distress, you see truly who your friends are. And as time goes on, more countries are going to, I think, realize, not necessarily siding with China, but wanting more cooperation, that this is the way. You just cannot reverse globalization like that and reverse everything that's happened. Because if you do that and pull yourself out like Trump's been doing with everything, that's just going to leave you behind, falling behind, and everyone will go ahead of you. Then you'll realize, this is also something to see long-term what will happen after this ends. We'll have to see what all this talk has been about with, inter-country trade and cooperation and whatnot. I think it's going to be a big change after this.
Well, I look at China and how quickly they built those hospitals and how they mobilized the whole public to beat back coronavirus. And I look at our response over here and how, I mean, we can't, I mean, every state is on their own. We got 50 states doing their own thing. Trump will not invoke the Defense Production Act and really get things going. I mean, it seems so clear that we have an economy here with a bunch of capitalists trying to make profits and just leaving the people behind. And, Trump, I mean, he can't even bring himself to tell his supporters to not go out and protest amid all of this, right? Because I mean, it's a disaster, and it really shows that a socialist system is superior to capitalism. It's not just China that's been very effective in defeating this. We saw Vietnam has been very, very effective in beating coronavirus. Countries with a socialist system where the means of production are controlled by society and not just allowed to run rampant and do whatever is in the interest of the rich people, they seem to be able to handle this, right? I mean, China. If China had a free market system where every capitalist just did whatever they wanted to do and the interests of the country were left behind, they'd be in a mess. But they seem to have handled this pretty well. Am I right?
Oh, I definitely agree. We saw in the beginning, of course, as they even openly admitted, there were mistakes made. Of course, there were, as in any country. But the thing people also, I think, need to keep in mind is that China, prior to this, they didn't have any warning like the rest of the world did about this, because people like to bring up the situation with the doctor that unfortunately passed away, the Li Wenliang, and that they say he was silenced or he's against the system, which of course is complete. It's absurd to say this. He himself is a member of the Communist Party of China. How can you twist him to be against this, speaking out against this? It's not. And of course, they admit what happened to him, and that of course there was a slow response. But in I think 3 days, they decided to completely shut down Wuhan. No travel in, no travel out. Slowly, all the countries, the cities and everywhere in China all did the same thing. I remember in my girlfriend's city, it's a small city in Sichuan province, and life was totally normal. We saw there were cases in Wuhan, watching on the news, and then, all of a sudden because my girlfriend's mom is a community worker who works in their apartment complex, who's in charge of the buildings in the residence there, and all of a sudden, when we got home from going outside to the supermarket or something, or for a walk, there was a piece of paper, or I saw in the news first saying, oh, wow, I think it's by tomorrow, all apartment communities will be in a lockdown type of thing where only those who live in that complex can go in, those who don't cannot. And that one day, we had to stay inside. Everything was shut down like this, very quickly. And from start to finish, in their city, they only had, I believe, just 25 cases from the entire thing. And when we would leave the apartment complex, we had to sign out on a piece of paper the time, where we're going, what building, room we live in, phone number. Then when we went into the supermarket, had to have our temperature taken. Then we left, went back to the apartment complex, had to have the temperature taken before they opened the gate to go back inside, and I had to sign back in the time we got back, had temperature taken one more time, and then go back inside, all because of this system of contact tracing, which we see here. They're starting to get up. Like Massachusetts is doing, I think they're doing well with this and moving it up as best they can, considering what the situation is. But we can see what they did there is they say, oh, it's surveillance. No, it's a way to, for those community workers, they have to make sure where people were going, how long they were gone for, and if my girlfriend's mom said, if someone came back from Wuhan who lived there, they had to, of course, report saying they were from Wuhan, and they had to be placed under quarantine for 2 weeks at home to monitor them. But then everyone in that building, like maybe that couple floors who lived on that building, had to also be under quarantine just to be safe. And, of course, this inconvenienced all of our lives, when we were there, and especially in Wuhan, over a 70-day lockdown. But now we just saw yesterday the CNN reporter was allowed back into Wuhan and went back, and he said the changes, it was amazing how the situation was almost 2 or 3 months ago, and now it's almost like nothing happened. People are back to normal. And we have, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. As an American communist, how do you think socialism in the United States will be different than socialism in China? What do you envision about American socialism?
I think, of course, because, our party, we don't have a blueprint of what's going to happen. But what we can, from my perspective, is that what we can do is, of course, we can see the successes that happened our party is doing as well, is just seeing what happened in the previous Soviet Union, inside Cuba, inside Vietnam, inside China, Laos, inside the DPRK, the successes that have happened. But of course, as we know, socialism and even Karl Marx, Engels, Lenin, they did not give us a blueprint a mode, a special like formula to follow step by step. That's why they call it, Chinese socialism, Korean socialism, Cuban socialism, because we will have our own American socialism, which will have to meet the conditions of our country's, current situation plus its historical traditions, combined together with the ideas of socialism and the practices of socialism. And people will say, oh, look what happened there, look what happened at that time. It happened. It's not to say this is going to happen here. Those bad things that happened were products of a certain historical period of time. You cannot just say it'll happen here. We have to find a way for it to work here. But of course, we envision a society here of American-style socialism where the democratic rights of the people will be further expanded. The true democratic rights will be expanded to the vast majority of the American people. There'll be a much better, system of, you can say, job security, education, housing, food, these basic necessities. That healthcare is a big one as well. Who think that, you have people who say it's not a right. It's, it can be as a privilege, but of course, everyone has the right to live. Then we also have the right to have a job security, educational security, and a healthcare security. So we think when this day comes, as Gus Hall, one of our previous general secretary, chairman of our party, had said that socialism will come in the United States when the vast majority of Americans want it. I think especially through this pandemic situation and how it was being handled in the United States with Donald Trump at the head, more and more people are joining our party, are interested in socialism. Just like when he was first elected, more and more are interested and more are waking up to the idea that this is not a sustainable way of life. It's not a sustainable way for long term, for the future, or for the planet, let alone ourselves. And that more people realize that we need some, not just, like changing a Band-Aid or something like that, switching this. It needs to be fundamental change from the, throughout the entire thing.
Well, let me ask you also, you reached out to me after seeing a video I did, where I talked about socialism and happiness, and you said that really struck a chord with you. Can you talk about that video, why you enjoyed it?
Sure. I saw the video because it gave me a very strong impression with the reason that many people in the West or outside of these socialist countries, they don't, seem to understand, of course, they don't have a lot of information on these countries or what life is like there. And they, if you look in Cuba, for example, we have many Cuban students in my university. And of course, they know what the situation is in their country better than we do, better than the politicians here. They know the true reality. Yet when I discuss these things with them, of course, we discuss the good and the bad. But in the end, they know that the system they have in place is much better than what was there before the revolution. You look in the DPRK, for example, in People's Korea. Of course, they know they have a very hard, difficult and major economic hardships, but they have this kind of revolutionary optimism, which is given. It's produced by just the system and the government, not trying to brainwash them, but it's this sense of everyone's a part of one big family. We're all in this together, like it's about us, not just me as an individual, but we all work together. Like in your video, you had mentioned an exchange student who had stayed with you, and he was, of course, he said he was against this, but his grandfather was a loyal communist, and how even just going out to build the roads, to pave the roads, such a small thing in our eyes in this country of many people. It's all just the roads, but for them, for a developing country, just this atmosphere of just happiness, working together, labor side by side with one another, doing things that are not just going to benefit you, but benefit generations to come for the whole nation. And this, of these, like they have the music in these socialist countries that sings of, in praises of the people, sing in praise of the country, sing in praise of the party, in praise of socialism, to give this kind of sense of general happiness that it's quite difficult for people who have never been there or extensively researched or experienced it. It's very hard to understand why people, even if you're in a hardship, why would you still feel so happy? As like for us, I myself feel like the man that you had mentioned in New York who wore the Palestine hat every day. I feel, I live a simple life, and, regardless of the hardships we have, as a Chinese saying for Communist Party members is that you have to first face the difficulties now at first to get to the sweet parts and the happy parts of life after. That stuff never comes first. So you have to keep this mentality of even you doing a small thing, you're still doing it to add to this collective of this movement that's bigger than just one person.
Yeah. Great. Well, I really want us to have more of these conversations because here in the United States, the only way we're going to get out of this crisis is with socialism. I mean, we need an economy that's organized to serve public good. We need to study socialism with Chinese characteristics. We need to study Ba'athist Arab socialism. We need to study the Soviet Union and their experience, Bolivarianism in Latin America. And that's why I'm in the process. It's actually on hold now because of the pandemic, of building this think tank, the Center for Political Innovation. We were going to have our launch conference on the 18th. We obviously had to call it off because of the pandemic. But once this pandemic is over, we are going to launch, and we are going to form the Center for Political Innovation. We're going to have a launch conference on the East Coast as well as on the West Coast. I'm very excited about it. And I hope that you, Dylan, and other people like you, people from your organization, but other organizations as well, will be part of this process, because we need to figure out how we can get the United States out of this crisis of profits and wars and poverty and deindustrialization and get toward a socialist society here where people have what they need and we have a good relationship with countries around the world. So I thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And I'm sure people will love this video. I'm going to put your scene at the front of it so people can see your moment on the limelight. And it should be good. So thank you, Dylan. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be able to just have a nice exchange of views and of actual experiences. Hopefully, it will give more people a better insight as to better than what they see on mainstream media. As I always say, it's better to not take lightly or as God's word what you see in any media, but definitely to talk to the people who either live in it or who have personally experienced it. So I hope this gives can open some more eyes for some people here and elsewhere. I hope so. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks.
在心中种一颗泰山顶的松，生长成5000年骄傲的种，敞开胸襟，迎八面来风，自信的笑容，幸福的憧憬，在胸中画一幅黄河黄的景。飞扬龙的精神，万马奔腾，挽紧手臂，迎风与彩虹，去跨越难关，让梦想纵横。中国梦是我的梦，是你的梦，13亿人们共同的心声，让我们一起来书写答案，让我们共同享受激情。中国梦是我的梦，是你的梦，让整个世界都为它震惊。看中国道路越来越宽广，看日出东方那么的红，看日出东方那么的红。
谢谢淡然，唱得非常淡然啊。
谢谢老师。
我特别想知道